Hi, this is No Ordinary Voice of Spiritual Ventriloquism. You are listening to him himself. Well, had a good question today on Facebook and thought that this would make an excellent subject to speak of on YouTube as well. The question was concerning this book right here, the book of Jubilees, okay, which is also known as Sefer Ch or outside writings. It falls into the same category as the Book of Enoch, the Apocrypha, and whatnot. I'm not trying to validate one over the other or say they're all equal, or even that portions of each one are valid or invalid, because I believe there's when you say a smorgasbord of issues in all of them. Both good and not so good. So, well, anyway, without any further ado, I do want to talk about this. The question was concerning the Book of Jubilees and what the points were for and or against it as far as supporting scripture or whatnot. My personal opinion is that the Book of Jubilees is a work, more than likely an ascetic work, probably of Essene origin. And, it does have that flavor, that, what you say, that Dead Sea Scroll flavor on it. And therefore, I would probably put this, to my best guess, as being of Essene authorship. Whether it was in the Ethiopic version or any other version. But anyway, the question being was that, I had basically had to pose an argument, or position why I felt the way I did. Well, the reason I feel the way I did is not because it's just an outside writing that's not part of this book, because the Apocrypha has many, many great things in it. And I believe should be part of the book, as well as Book of Jubilees, because there are some very good points in the book. However, when you do get to chapter 50, it begins to, right there at the very end, it talks about, and it's kind of being passed off as if this is still Moses' writings. And, that's something we have to, try to reconcile, because, even one of these other texts that I'm going to use, Isaiah 58, really is known by scholars as the second Isaiah, which was of Persian period authorship. So it was a little bit outside the time of the prophet. Not saying that there weren't notes and smatterings of what the prophet had to say, not saying that. But the fact that it was actually not worded, penned down, as it is with the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy is unanimous among scholars that it is of 7th to 8th century BCE origin, or during the reign of Hezekiah and Josiah, and nothing earlier. And even the name Deuteronomos suggests late authorship, because that word means second law. And anyway, so when I'm going to go here, chapter 50 of the Book of Jubilees, and why I do have a few problems with the Book of Jubilees, is one is the subject of sex on the Sabbath. Oh my goodness, it's getting racy and dicey now. Let's go ahead right here, chapter 50. Page 95 in the paperback version, I guess, says here, and behold, the command of the Sabbath. This is article 4 or paragraph 4, verse 4. And behold, the command of the Sabbath I have written down for thee, and all the judgments of its laws. 6 days you shall do work, and on the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. Shall not do any work in it, neither shall ye, nor your children, nor your male servants, nor your maidservants, nor any of your beasts, nor your stranger who is with you. The man that does any work on it shall die. And that is rather confirmed by the Torah. Man went out to gather sticks on the Sabbath, and he was put in ward until it was decided what he should do. And the penalty that was levied against him was death for doing that kind of work. So, but then it continues on here, and this is where it gets a little sketchy. And every man who desecrates this day, who lies with a wife, no, it's a wife. So we're talking about patriarchal polygyny here. And who says that he will do something on it, that he will make a trip on it. And these are key phrases. Who says that he will do something on it, or that he will make a trip on it, or concerning all buying and selling. This is a key phrase here. And who draws water on it, which he did not prepare for himself on the sixth day. And whoever takes a burden to carry it out of his tent or out of his house, he shall die. Okay. Now let's go back to this whole thing about the man lying with the wife. Nowhere in all of Torah, as far as the weekly Sabbath is concerned, is there ever a penalty of death, even remotely suggested, for something as, we should say, stupid as lying with your wife. And I'll tell you in a moment why it's stupid, okay? It's because of the conclusions that we chain along through our previous religious training without actually knowing what the original Hebrew texts are saying. And that is that, he who lies with his wife will die. There's nothing in the Torah for that. There's nothing in the prophets for that. The closest thing you can get to it is Isaiah 58. And again, I must stress that though I believe Isaiah 58 is a legitimate text, that it is outside of the time of Isaiah. But regardless of all that, the text itself does not support this conclusion in this charge that is being made here in Jubilees chapter 50, verse 5. I believe it is. Yeah, verse 5. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, verse 6 of chapter 50 of Jubilees. And so let's go to that in Isaiah. And let's see what Isaiah says for a moment, because you have to do things line upon line, precept upon precept. Here is a judgment that's being passed that cannot be found in the Tanakh, or in the Tanakh, the 5 books of Moses, regardless of when they were written or redacted. And now we go to the prophets, Isaiah 58. It says, here you go. It says here, in the first part of Isaiah 58, let's start here at verse 4. Is it a fast that I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his being? Is it to bow down his head like a bulrush and to spread out sackcloth and ashes? Do you call this a fast? An acceptable day, singular, unto Yahweh? Is this not the fast that I have chosen? Verse 6, to loosen the tight cords of wrongness, to undo the bands of the yoke, to exempt the oppressed, and to break off every yoke. Okay? This is speaking to the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippurim. So we know right here that we're speaking about a particular day. And this is a festival day, a day of fasting and affliction, and obviously would not be a proper day to have relations when you should be doing your soul searching and whatnot, because it is such a solemn assembly, such a solemn occasion. So anyway, and then it says here, let's go on down to verse 12. And those from among you shall build up the old waste places. I believe that's talking about us, this generation. You shall raise up the foundation of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. And then here's the pregnant if. If you do turn back your foot from the Sabbath. Now, this is talking about the weekly Sabbath, okay? Now, and then this is where the next phrase, where the connection from Jubilees chapter 50 to Isaiah 58 to Exodus 20 is now being made. From doing your pleasure on my set apart day, and shall call the Sabbath a delight, the set apart day of Yahweh esteemed, and shall esteem it, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words. Okay? Well, it is a pleasure to eat, and the weekly Sabbath is not a day of fasting. It is a day of feasting. It is a feast day. So, if you derive pleasure in eating, then you would become a transgressor of the Sabbath day. Okay? Now, let's turn back from doing your own pleasure, and these key words, doing your own pleasure, speaking your own words. Those two Hebrew words are davar, which means to talk of business, to conduct business, advertising, things like that, which when you go back here to Jubilees chapter 50, it does indeed cover that. But then it adds this pregnant thing out there in the middle of nowhere for somebody who lies with their wife is going to be killed, or the penalty of that is death, has no foundation in Torah, and you're not even going to be able to find it here, because this isn't what pleasure is being described here. Okay. Now, it says, then you shall delight yourself in Yahweh, and I shall cause you to ride on the heights of the earth, and feed you with the inheritance of Jacob your father, for the mouth of Yahweh has spoken it. Okay? So, we know that Isaiah 58, it begins talking about the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippurim. We might even go to another feast day, the Feast of Pentecost, where the people were instructed to guard themselves against the third day, and for none of the men to come at their wives. Now this is symbolic, because this is when God himself was being wed to these people. And it really was not proper for them to have relations with their wives at this time, because one, they were being given the Ketubah marriage Torah agreement as a nation, and they were being wed. And I mean, it's not like, some bachelor or bachelorette party before the wedding. God's not going to accept that crap, and it's understandably so. But we are limiting this to that particular Pentecost when the law was given. Now, you might extrapolate that and say, well, as a memorial, we should, abstain from relationships with our spouses and whatnot. I'll give you that much. But to try to then go and extrapolate that back to the weekly Sabbath has absolutely no foundation. Now, the other thing is the Sabbath is considered a day in which cannot be desecrated or defiled. This is another charge that is being brought forward here in Jubilees chapter 50, the issue of defilement. The only problem that I have with that is that to become ceremonially unclean only applied to the priests, and also applied to the people who were bringing offerings to the priest or to the altar. And seeing that there are no offerings made on the Sabbath day, it is not a day of offering. Okay, it actually cessations from offerings occurred on the Sabbath. Even the Apostle Paul said that there should be no collections on the Sabbath when he comes, but that every man should lay aside and store for himself on the first day, and then collection could be made so that there will be no gatherings or offerings made on the Sabbath day. So now you have both an Old and a New Testament witness as to who ceremonially unclean persons were being spoken of here, which was the priest and or people that would, on a normal day, be bringing offerings, but these offerings were not made under Torah on the Sabbath day. Okay? So therefore, ceremonial uncleanness as far as the people goes is not even an issue. And this is one thing that we need to remember. The Pharisees were good at trying to take things that would apply to the priesthood, and then they would begin to start to force these rules and regulations on the people, when Yah never intended for the people to be to that level of what do you say, of requirements. Okay, this is the stuff that was all concocted